The gentle golden light from the setting sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting a soft warmth across the countertops as I prepared dinner. The faint hum of the radio created a calming background to my thoughts, which kept drifting to my son David, who had just come home for the weekend from college. At 21, David was no longer the little boy who used to follow me around the house, constantly asking questions about life. Now, he had grown into a tall and confident young man. This thought filled my heart with both pride and a wave of nostalgia. "David, dinner's ready," I called out, my voice carrying. Moments later, he walked through the door of our modest home, his presence filling the room in ways I hadn't expected. As we sat down to eat, I couldn't help but notice how he was looking at me. There was a depth to his gaze that made me pause for a moment. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just my imagination, or perhaps the effect of the fading daylight on our conversation. As we ate, he spoke freely about his studies, his friends, and how much he missed being at home. But there was something about the way he spoke, the way his eyes lingered on mine, that unsettled me. It was a sensation I couldn't quite explain, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to explore it further. After dinner, we decided to watch a movie together, slipping into an old routine that felt both comforting and strange. The living room seemed cozier, with the dim lighting and soft cushions creating an intimate atmosphere I hadn't expected. As the movie played, I found myself divided. Part of me focused on the screen, while another part was acutely aware of David sitting next to me. I caught myself looking at him more than I probably should have. The child I had raised was no longer sitting beside me. In his place was a young man I was only beginning to know. During one of these fleeting glances, I felt David's hand brush against mine. The touch was brief, but sparked a wave of sensation I couldn't ignore. Surprised by how intense my reaction was, I quickly pulled my hand away. "What's wrong, Mom?" David asked gently, his voice filled with concern. I looked at him, my heart racing, unsure how to respond or what to make of what had just happened. "Nothing, sweetie," I managed to reply with a forced smile. "I'm just tired, that's all." Even as I said this, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Something had shifted in that moment, blurring the line between mother and son. Though neither of us had crossed it, the air between us was thick with unspoken emotions. We sat there in silence, the movie playing in the background, but I quickly spoke up. "I think I'll go to bed early," I said, my voice strained, even to my own ears. "Good night, David." As I walked away, I could feel his gaze on me, and a sense that something fundamental had shifted between us. In the quiet of my bedroom, I leaned against the door, my mind spinning. I knew I couldn't let these feelings grow. I needed to maintain distance, for both our sakes. But as I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me. I had no idea how to navigate this new, tricky situation. The love I felt for my son was pure and unconditional, but the events of the evening had cast a shadow over it. As I tossed and turned, memories of David's childhood filled my mind, adding layers of complexity to the situation. I remembered the first time he called me Mama, his first steps, and the pride I felt when he learned to ride a bike. Those memories were pure and untouched, but now they seemed distant, separated from the present by an invisible wall. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was making too much of an innocent moment. David was my son, and I was his mother. There was nothing more to it. But as the night dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something dangerous, something that could change our relationship forever if we weren't careful. The next morning, I woke feeling uneasy. The events of the previous night still lingered heavily in my thoughts. I took my time getting ready, postponing the moment when I would have to face David. But I knew I couldn't stay in my room forever. When I finally went downstairs, I found David already awake. He smiled at me from the kitchen table, where he was sipping coffee, acting as if nothing unusual had happened the night before. I allowed myself to believe it was just a figment of my imagination. A strange moment only I had noticed. "Good morning, Mom," he said in his usual calm voice. "I was thinking about going for a hike later. Do you want to join me?" I hesitated, unsure whether it was wise to spend more time alone with him after what had happened. But then I reminded myself that he was my son, and there was nothing inappropriate about a mother spending time with her child. "Sure," I said, dismissing my concerns. "That sounds nice." As I prepared breakfast, I felt David's gaze on me again. I tried to act normally, but there was an underlying tension I couldn't ignore. I found myself overthinking every word, every action, worried that I might accidentally send the wrong message. That afternoon, we drove to a nearby trail, a place we had visited many times when David was younger. The familiar surroundings brought a flood of memories of David as a young boy, full of energy and curiosity, pointing out every rock and leaf along the way. Now, he walked beside me as a man. Our conversation drifted from his college experiences to memories of past family vacations. The air was fresh, the sky was clear, and everything felt normal for a brief moment. We walked side by side, discussing nothing in particular. I found myself laughing at his jokes, feeling a little more at ease, thinking perhaps I had overreacted the night before. But as we continued along the trail, there were moments when the conversation would fade, and a heavy silence would hang between us. These quiet moments felt loaded, filled with an unspoken tension, a sense of something unsaid lingering in the air. At one point, as we reached a clearing with a beautiful view of the valley, David's gaze was so intense it made my heart skip a beat. "You've always been there for me, Mom," he said softly but sincerely. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The way he said it caught me off guard, and the vulnerability in his voice made my heart ache. I smiled, trying to lighten the moment. "You don't need to worry about that anytime soon," I said with a laugh. "I'm not going anywhere." But David didn't laugh. He took a step closer, his eyes fixed on mine. "No, I mean it," he said. "You've always been more than just my mom. You've been everything." I froze. The words hung in the air, heavy with a meaning I wasn't prepared to face. I searched his face, hoping to find some sign that this was just a moment of sentimentality, but there was something in his eyes that made my heart race again. "David," I whispered, barely above a breath, "you know how much I love you, right?" "Of course," he replied, stepping even closer. "I love you too, Mom, more than you realize." My pulse quickened. This wasn't how a mother and son were supposed to talk or look at each other. My mind screamed for me to step back, to create some space between us, but my body felt paralyzed. "I think we should head back," I said, my voice trembling. "It's getting late." But before I could turn away, David reached out and gently took my hand. His touch was innocent enough, but the way he held it and the slow brush of his thumb against my skin made my stomach twist with a mix of emotions I couldn't quite define. "Mom," he said softly, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "I'm not sure how to express this, but I've been sensing something. Something I shouldn't feel, and I believe you might have felt it too." The realization hit me, and I quickly pulled my hand away. Stepping back, my heart racing in my chest. David paused, and I spoke, my voice shaking. "You don't mean that. You're just confused." He looked at me, his face showing a blend of hurt and something else, something I wasn't ready to identify. "I'm not confused, Mom," he replied, firm in his tone. "I know how I feel." I shook my head. "No, this isn't right. You're my son." The sentence was left unfinished, the words too dangerous, too heavy to voice. David inhaled deeply, his expression filled with conflicting emotions. "I know, Mom. I know it's wrong," he said, "but I can't control what I feel, and I don't think you can either." Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled to keep my composure. This couldn't be real. I had to stop this before it went further, before we crossed a line we couldn't uncross. "I'm your mother," I said, my voice breaking. "And I love you, but not like that. I can't. We can't." The words hung between us, suffocating, and I could see the pain in David's eyes, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the ground, almost as if ashamed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." I swallowed hard, trying to calm the storm inside me. "It's okay," I murmured softly, though I wasn't sure it was. As we walked back down the trail toward home, the stunning landscape seemed to mock the inner turmoil I was feeling. The drive home was thick with silence, neither of us speaking, the weight of our conversation hanging between us, making every second feel unbearable. My gaze was fixed on the road, my mind racing to make sense of what had just transpired. I couldn't grasp the words David had spoken, the feelings he had confessed. It was like everything I thought I knew about our relationship had been shattered. When we finally arrived home, David mumbled something about heading to his room. I didn't stop him as he vanished up the stairs. I collapsed onto the couch, my body trembling from the emotions I had been holding back since that moment. I didn't know how to understand any of this. David was my son, my little boy, but he wasn't a child anymore, and it was becoming all too clear that our relationship had shifted into something neither of us was prepared for. As the evening wore on, I couldn't shake the oppressive cloud of confusion and guilt that had settled over the house. It felt eerily still, every creak in the house amplifying the tension in the air. I tried to keep busy with simple tasks like washing dishes and folding laundry, anything to keep my hands moving and my mind away from the dangerous thoughts. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the memory of David's words, the look in his eyes that hinted at feelings a son shouldn't have for his mother. I wanted to believe it was just a phase, some confusion caused by the pressures of college and the comfort of being home. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. As I absent-mindedly flipped through TV channels, my mind drifted back to David's childhood. I thought of the day he was born, how I had held him in my arms and felt an overwhelming love that made me cry. I remembered his first steps, his first words, and the pride I felt when he learned to ride a bike without training wheels. Those memories were pure, untouched by the complications of adult life. How had we gone from those innocent days to this? Where had I gone wrong? A part of me wondered if I had somehow encouraged these feelings without realizing it. Had I been too affectionate, too close over the years? But that couldn't be right, could it? Mothers were supposed to love their sons, care for them, and be there for them. That's all I had ever done. Yet now, everything felt tainted by this strange tension between us, and I didn't know how to fix it. Later that night, I found myself standing in front of David's bedroom door. I raised my hand to knock, but hesitated. What would I say? How could I even address what had happened without making things worse? In the end, I lowered my hand and retreated to my own room, feeling like a coward. Sleep was impossible. My mind replayed the day's events over and over. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face, heard his words echoing in my head. You've always been more than just my mom. You've been everything. Words that should have been sweet now felt loaded with a meaning I couldn't grasp. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed, dreading the thought of facing David over breakfast. But when I went downstairs, I found an empty note on the fridge. Gone for a run. Needed to clear my head. I felt a mix of relief and disappointment. Relief that I didn't have to face him right away, but disappointed that we were already avoiding each other. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. As I sat quietly in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, I tried to figure out a way forward. We couldn't go on pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. But I also knew we couldn't simply ignore what had happened. The feelings David had confessed, and the ones I was trying so desperately to suppress. They weren't going to disappear. I spent the day in a fog, moving through my usual routine without really engaging with anything. When I heard the front door open in the afternoon, my heart leapt into my throat. David was back. I heard him pause in the hallway, probably unsure whether to seek me out or retreat to his room. After a moment, I heard his footsteps approach the kitchen. "Hey," he said softly, standing in the doorway. I turned to face him, and tried to force a smile. Sweetie, how was your run? David didn't meet my gaze. It was okay. It helped clear my head a bit. An uncomfortable silence fell between us. I kept chopping vegetables, unsure of what to say, and David stood in the doorway, hesitant. Mom, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk about yesterday? I set the knife down, my heart racing. This was the conversation I had been dreading, but I knew it couldn't be avoided forever. Of course, I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Let's sit down. We moved to the living room, each of us sitting on opposite ends of the couch. The distance between us felt both necessary and painful. David took a deep breath, running a hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since he was little. I'm sorry, he began. What I said yesterday, I shouldn't have put that on you. It wasn't fair. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. David, I sighed. I know this is confusing for both of us, but we have to be careful. This isn't how things are supposed to be between us. I know, he said, his voice cracking. But Mom, I can't help how I feel. I've tried to push it away, tried to convince myself it's wrong. His voice trailed off, and he looked lost. I felt my heart break for him, for both of us. This was a situation I had never imagined myself in, and I had no idea how to handle it. David, listen to me, I said gently but firmly. I'm your mother. That's all I can ever be. Do you understand that? He nodded, though I could see the pain in his eyes. I do, he whispered. I don't want to lose you, Mom. I'm scared things will never be the same between us. I reached out, taking his hand in mine. It was a risky move, given the circumstances. But in that moment, my desire to comfort my child outweighed everything else. You're not going to lose me, I reassured him. I'll always be here for you and always love you. But we have to set boundaries, David. We have to be careful. For a long moment, we sat in silence, the tension still thick between us, though there was also an unspoken understanding that things couldn't continue as they had. We both knew that, even if neither of us wanted to admit it. Maybe, I said hesitantly, maybe it would be best if you went back to school a little early. I think we both need some space to clear our heads. David nodded slowly, his eyes filled with sadness. Yeah, he said quietly. Maybe you're right. The next morning, I watched as he packed his things. The air between us was thick with unspoken emotions. I wanted to hug him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not after everything that had happened. When he left, the house felt emptier than it had in a long time. I sat on the couch, staring out the window, long after his car had disappeared down the street. I knew we had made the right choice by putting some distance between us, but that didn't make it any easier. As the days passed, I tried to fall back into my routine, but it wasn't the same. The house felt too quiet without David, and I found myself thinking about him more than I should have. I wanted to believe the distance would help, that it would give us both the time we needed to sort through our feelings. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. I understood that things could never return to how they were before. A week after David left, I got a text from him. "Back safe, miss you, Mom." Those simple words brought tears to my eyes. I missed him too, more than I wanted to admit. But I also realized that my longing wasn't just about missing my son anymore. There was something more, something I was afraid to acknowledge. I typed several replies but deleted each one before I could send it. How could I express my feelings for him without crossing the boundaries we had set? In the end, I settled for a brief response. "Glad you're safe. Miss you too. Study hard." As I set my phone down, I noticed a framed picture on the mantel. It was from David's high school graduation, us, smiling widely for the camera, his arm around my shoulders. We looked so happy, so normal. I wondered if we would ever have that easy, uncomplicated relationship again, or if it was gone forever. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of yearning and relief. I threw myself into work and hobbies, anything to keep my mind busy. But in quiet moments, my thoughts would inevitably wander to David. I wondered how he was doing, whether he could focus on his studies, or if he was just as distracted as I was. We texted occasionally, keeping the conversations light and casual. Neither of us brought up what had happened during his visit. It was easier to pretend things were normal, to act as if we were just a regular mother and son, separated by distance and busy lives. But deep down, I knew things had shifted permanently. Every message from David, every photo he sent, now carried a weight that hadn't been there before. I found myself analyzing every word, every emoji, wondering if there was hidden meaning behind them. One evening, after a particularly long workday, I found myself flipping through the photo album from David's childhood. Page after page of memories, birthdays, Christmases, family vacations. I ran my finger over his smiling face in each picture, marveling at how he had grown from a chubby toddler into the handsome young man he was now. As I turned the pages, a deep ache filled my chest. I missed the simplicity of those times when my love for David was straightforward and pure. Now, that love had become tangled with something else, something I couldn't quite define or control. I closed the album, feeling a blend of guilt and longing I couldn't shake. This wasn't how things were supposed to be. I was his mother, and that should have been enough. But as I lay in bed that night, tossing and turning, I couldn't deny the truth any longer. The feelings David had confessed, the ones I had quickly dismissed and tried to suppress, were real. Somewhere along the way, without me realizing it, my love for him had changed into something more, something that both thrilled and terrified me. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living in this uncertainty, pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I needed to see David. We needed to talk in person, to figure out what came next, no matter what that meant. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and typed a message. David, we need to talk. Can I come visit you this weekend? His response came almost instantly. Yes, please. I'll be waiting. As I packed a small bag for the trip, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. I didn't know what would happen when I saw David again, but I knew one thing for sure. Our relationship would never be the same again. For better or worse, we were about to step into unfamiliar territory, and there was no going back. The drive to David's college town felt both endless and too brief. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white with tension, as my mind raced through all the possible scenarios that might unfold. Once I reached the familiar landscape, it blurred past my window, but I barely noticed it, too consumed by my own chaotic thoughts. As I neared the campus, my heart began to race. I hadn't seen David in person since that day on the hiking trail, and the memory of our last encounter was still painfully vivid. How would he react when he saw me? How would I react when I saw him? I pulled into the visitor parking lot, taking a few deep breaths to steady myself before getting out of the car. David had sent me his dorm building and room number, and I made my way across the bustling campus, feeling out of place among the young students rushing to and from classes. Standing outside his door, I hesitated for a moment before knocking. There was a brief silence, followed by the sound of footsteps, and the door swung open. David stood there, looking both familiar and different. His hair was a bit longer than when I had last seen him, and there was a hint of stubble on his jaw. But it was his eyes that surprised me. They lit up when they saw me, filled with a mix of joy and something else I couldn't quite name. "Mom," he whispered, and before I knew it, he pulled me into a tight hug. I would have allowed myself to sink into the embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of him. But then I remembered why I was there. I gently pulled away. "Hi, sweetie," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "Can I come inside?" David nodded and stepped aside to let me enter his modest dorm room. It was clean, but plainly lived in, with textbooks scattered on the desk and a few posters on the walls. I sat awkwardly on the edge of his bed while he took the desk chair and turned it to face me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavy, filled with everything we needed to say, but didn't know how to express. Finally, David broke the stillness. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "I've been thinking a lot about you, about our relationship." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. I, too, knew we couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. We needed to talk about what this was and what we were going to do moving forward. David leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Mom, I meant what I said before about my feelings for you," he said. "I'm not just confused or going through a phase. I've tried to push them away, to focus on other things, but I can't." I interrupted him, my voice barely a whisper. "I've been feeling that too," I admitted. The truth changed everything and nothing at the same time. David's eyes widened with hope and disbelief. "You have?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my chest, only to be replaced by a new one. Yeah, I answered, and it scares me. David looked at me, his voice quiet but passionate. Mom, I love you, not just as my mother, but as a woman, someone I can't change, no matter how hard I try. Tears welled up in my eyes. Oh, David, I whispered, I love you more than I should, but we can't act on this. He nodded slowly, his eyes filled with turmoil. I know, he said softly, but that doesn't change how I feel. We sat in silence for a minute, the weight of our confessions hanging in the air. When I looked at David, I didn't just see my son. I saw the man he had become, handsome, intelligent, and caring. In another world, in another life, perhaps, but not here, not now. We needed to find a way forward, to redefine our relationship in a way that we could both accept. So what do we do now? David asked, his voice uncertain. I took a deep breath and tried to gather my thoughts. We acknowledge what we feel, I said slowly. We don't deny it, but we also don't act on it. We can't. David nodded, a mixture of resignation and relief in his expression. Then we focus on building a new kind of relationship, I continued. Can we still be close, still love each other, while maintaining clear and respectful boundaries? David seemed unsure. Can we just turn these feelings off? I shook my head. No, I don't think we can turn them off, but we can learn to live with them and channel them into something we're both comfortable with. We spent the next few hours talking, opening up to each other in ways we never had before. We shared our fears, our hopes, our guilt. We cried and laughed together, slowly beginning to imagine what our new relationship might look like. It wouldn't be easy, and we both knew there would be times when the temptation to cross those boundaries would be overwhelming. But we also knew that the love between a mother and her son was too precious to risk. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across David's dorm room, I stood up to leave. We both knew it was time to part. I love you, Mom, David said as he walked me to my car. Thank you for coming, for understanding. I pulled him into an embrace, holding him close one last time before our new limits took effect. I love you too, sweetie, I replied. As I drove home that evening, I felt a strange mix of sadness and hope. The bond David and I had once shared was gone, replaced by emotions we had never expected to feel. But in its place, we were building something new, something that recognized the depth of our love while respecting the boundaries it required. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of weakness, longing, and wishing things could be different. But as I watched the sunset, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, a sense of peace settled over me. David and I would find a way through this. We would redefine our love, our relationship, in a way we could both live with. It wouldn't be perfect, but it would be ours. And in the end, that would be enough.